around this room, Catholic women have many options for community and ministry that do not necessitate putting ourselves under the thumbs of patriarchs. Meanwhile, the sisters continue to do exemplary work in social justice and other forms of ministry, putting some of the high-living kyriarchs to shame by their simple lifestyles, their impressive stewardship of resources, and their generous care of their many elderly members. At the same time, the Vatican's Congregation of Doctrine of the Faith, talk about spiritual bankruptcy, has acted on concerns of the Committee on Doctrine of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops to begin what's called a doctrinal assessment of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, the LCWR, the organization that provides resources and support for the leaders of women's orders. The areas of Vatican concern are quite familiar. Top of the list. Homosexual, us. Faithful and fabulous, us. Second on the list, girls, women's ordination, no surprise. And third on the list, maybe a little, coming out of the shadows, Dominus Jesus. You wouldn't have guessed that one. The declaration by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith that was issued in response to growing religious pluralism. The fact that so many Catholics believe that salvation is possible through more paths than our own. And by the way, yes, Dominus Jesus, that was, the only way to heaven is our way. Homosexuality, women's ordination, and Dominus Jesus. By the way, LCWR learned about the investigation in the National Catholic Reporter. So much for email. Twitter. Facebook. National Catholic Reporter. Women like our own Janine Gramick, popular writer Joan Chittister, tireless justice seeker Donna Quinn, the legendary Sister Teresa Kane, these women are all implicated in the Vatican's worries about nuns. It's extraordinary that women of this caliber would be subjected to attacks on their good names. But Catholic women are all subject to attacks. Both Vatican struggles with women in religious communities are expensive. They're labor-intensive wastes of time for good women whose ministry and social justice work will be interrupted insofar as they have to respond. I read these scandalous actions against progressive American nuns as a reliable indicator of just how spiritually bankrupt the kyriarchy has become. When they have to go after their own, in this case women who have vowed obedience to them, it makes one realize how tenuous is their claim on being church. Do you see why we have to be something different? Yeah. This view is only reinforced by the third constellation of changes, that is to say, the moral, the spiritual, and now the financial bankruptcy that involves the closing of parishes without consultation and the firing of church personnel without due process. An epidemic of church closings, especially of older, poorer parishes in inner cities, is causing many Catholics in the pews to wake up and smell the incense. In diocese after diocese, financial necessities related to settlements of pedophilia cases, as well as lowered incomes and deferred maintenance, have resulted in decisions made at the diocesan level to close local parishes. These decisions are often taken with little or no input from parishioners most deeply affected. The arbitrary closings have left a reservoir of ill will among many well-intentioned Catholics who have come to realize how kyriarchy functions and how little power they have. Many people have struggled valiantly, sitting in their own churches, carrying out vigils and proposing alternative ways of operating. Most of it has come to naught. Likewise, many ordinary Catholics have been shocked by how the institution treats its workers. Whether trying to keep unions at bay in Catholic hospitals or firing lay ministers who think for themselves, greater transparency about personnel matters has given many more people a glimpse into how not to run an institution, much less how to be a church. Sister of Charity Louise Lears was put under interdict in St. Louis recently and effectively run out of town by Archbishop Raymond Burke. The so-called delicts against her focus on her attendance at and support for the ordination of Roman Catholic women priests. Virtually the same day that he laid down the law, Archbishop Burke hightailed off to Rome to become the head of the Apostolic Signature, the Supreme Court of the Roman Catholic Church. You read the tea leaves. These three examples, the pedophilia crisis, the outrageous treatment of American nuns, and the discontent sowed by parish closings and personnel cases, about which rank-and-file Catholics have no say, lead me to conclude that Dignity's relationship to the Kyriarchal Church was a harbinger of things that have now come to pass in the larger church. 40 years later, we're all in the same boat. Just as LGBTQ Catholics were mistreated, so too were countless children and young people abused, women disrespected, all in the name of a God I do not recognize and a theology I do not accept. Just as queer Catholics and our colleagues, Conference of Catholic Lesbians, New Ways Ministries, as all of us have been maligned and rejected, so too are Catholic nuns being subjected to similar indignities. And just as parents and friends of queer Catholics gradually came to understand our oppression and join us in our struggle, so too are millions of Catholics in parishes all over the country claiming their baptismal rights to ministry and meaning through processes in which they participate. So it is that Dignity has remained faithful and fabulous, and now the rest of the church catches up. I fully expect this transformation of the Kyriarchal model to continue as it dies of its own weight and as new forms of community emerge. Meanwhile, Dignity is church in the good company of Catholic organizations for renewal, which includes Catholics for Choice, Federation of Christian Ministries, Women's Ordination Conference, the National Coalition of American Nuns, among many dedicated groups. As part of CORE, or Catholic Organizations for Renewal, Dignity is engaged in church reform work. And how well accompanied we are, and how well respected because of our leadership are we in that coalition. Secondly, Dignity is church as part of the Women Church Convergence, which includes some of those same suspects, plus the BDM Sisters Network of Women's Issues, Mary's Pence, the Loretto Women's Network, Cincinnati Dominican Women's Network, the local group here in the Bay Area, A Critical Mass, Eighth Day Center for Justice in Chicago, the Women's Alliance for Theology, Ethics, and Ritual, WATER, where I work. These are all members of the Women Church Convergence. As part of the convergence, Dignity is engaged in being church, as if women's well-being matters. How well accompanied we are in that work. Much more has changed about the Kyriarchal Church, which I hope we can discuss at our table shortly. But one thing that is certain is that in 40 years, the acceptance, indeed the celebration of same-sex love, has increased geometrically, not arithmetically, but geometrically in the Catholic community. For this, we can congratulate ourselves and thank our parents, our siblings, our friends, our God, especially those who have changed their minds in light of the witness of our lives. Now, I don't want to overstate the case. I'm fully aware that many people and organizations seek our return to the closet, or worse, and continue to denounce what they consider our moral and spiritual turpitude. I've always liked that word. But their numbers are dwindling. Their numbers are dwindling, and their voices are quieting in the face of ordinary people like us who simply want to love as we will, and who complexly want all the rights, both civil and religious, that accrue to being human.